Hey, how's it going, everybody? Scott Spreitzer here, and he is the Indian Cowboy. His name is Arun. You know him quite well if you've been following Doc Sports in the handicapping world for several years now. One of the best in the business, and I've been in this business my entire adult life. We're looking forward to this. First time that we've actually kicked off and talked about games with the both of us on the show at the same time. So this is going to be a blast. I don't want to say IC's old, but it's a little bit of the old and kind of the new. I don't want to give him too many compliments and say this is a 25-year-old out here. He's been around for a while too. But we got our unique perspectives. We're a little bit different on how we handicap. We like to come to that same winning result. We'll try to do so. Going to talk about the entire NFL card this week coming up on Sunday and, of course, on Monday night. Couple of games on Monday in just a moment. Before we jump into that, before we talk a little bit of college football bowl action, real quick note, if you've yet to become a member at DocSports.com and just want to give it a trial run, click on that link below the video, get yourself set up for a free $60 account, and then you can use those free $60 on any of his daily packages, any of my daily packages, anybody over at DocSports.com. It is as simple as that. Let's jump into it, IC. Let's talk some college bowl action. Next week on Wednesday night, Thursday morning, and we'll be here every Thursday morning. We're going to jump into the bowls a little bit more on an individual bowl basis, but they're far enough away, I think, right now to where we got to wait a little bit because of the portal and that kind of stuff. I was going to talk about, like this Saturday, you got South Alabama taking on Western Michigan in the Veterans Bowl. You got the Frisco Bowl on Tuesday, 2 more bowl games a week from Wednesday. There used to be a bowl tool, handicapping tool, I see, and maybe you used it. It doesn't work that much anymore. It's not as important, but I still look for it, and that is a bowl team that has at least a 2-to-1 rushing ratio over their opposition. I mean, it used to work like clockwork. You might only get 5, 6, maybe 7 games where this would fit, but it was almost a guaranteed winning bowl season when you use that. Now we got to worry about the portal. We got to worry about coaches leaving. I swear to God, they ought to change the rules and say you cannot leave through the portal or can't enter the portal until after the bowl season. And that might help out college football as it is right now. Real quick example that I'm going to throw it to you. We got this Cow Bowl coming up in LA next week on Wednesday. It's California, of course. They're hosting, or not hosting, but close enough, I guess, to take it on UNLV. And this game opened Cal 2 or thereabouts. There were a couple of 1.5s, but mostly 2. Barry Odom, the head coach of UNLV, takes the job at Purdue, makes a whole lot more money. Don't blame him for leaving. And that line goes from 2 all the way up to 5 in some spots. So a lot of sharps are going, man, I got a good number here. I laid 2, it's up to 5. Then we find out that Cal's entering the portal like crazy, including their starting quarterback. He's not going to play, and that number's back down to 1.5. That's what we got to prepare for these days, man. I remember Christian McCaffrey, I see, when he was the first big player to pull out of a bowl game, and we all thought, what is this guy doing? And now you got like 15 per team, it seems like.
Yeah, man, it's nuts. The amount of information that just comes in, you're flooded. And it's not like, like 1 or 2 pieces of information, because every single position player, right, is considering this. And then obviously coaches. So it's your NIL is not just your NIL, your transfer portals, your coaches that are constantly leaving. So it's kind of chaos. When I looked at this game, it's interesting Cal is favored by 1 now. The early thing that I liked about this game is the over. Right. If you look at this game, you'll see that Cal only scored 6 points in the last game against SMU, and they have enough talent in that team. I mean, they still have their coaching staff at the end of the day, and their head coach is still there, and they're trying to build ahead for next season. And then UNLV only scored 7 points in their last game against Boise State. And I've always believed that when young guys get a chance to play, 2 things happen. 1, the offense kicks up, right, but the defense gets worse.
Yeah,
because defense needs experience. And offense, you're just excited to get the opportunity. You have all that adrenaline. You want to be a running back. You want to be a receiver. You're running routes. So I wouldn't be surprised if that game goes over the posted total. But that's the first thing that I thought when I saw that game. But the other thing is, I mean, it's just, it's very difficult to keep. But here's the other thing. If you're able to really keep up with the news and you have the time to do it, you're going to find a lot of value, I think, versus others.
Yeah, I've been able to have a real nice run with the Bulls over at Doc Sports 24-12. And a lot of that has come to being able to, pay attention at all times of the day to what's going on, portals. Got a real nice group of bettors, a circle of bettors out here in Las Vegas, about 6 of us. And when one guy finds out some info, we can pass it on to the next. So it does help out quite a bit. I wanted to get your thoughts on the teams that are in the playoffs in college football, and then we'll get to the NFL. There's been a lot of talk about whether SMU belongs, whether Clemson belongs, whether Boise State and Arizona State should be seated as high as they are. And my thought is this: the NC2A has to decide. They've kind of teetered back and forth a little bit. They have to decide if this is a tournament you qualify for. And if that's the case, then with the parameters they've set, that's what they've got. 12 teams that qualified for it. Or they have to decide if it's going to be the top 12 teams in college football. It's got to be one or the other. And if it's going to be a qualifying tournament, that's fine. That means, like the NFL, you might have a 9-8 division winner, and in another division, you might have a team that's 10-7 with much better metrics that doesn't make the postseason. And that's kind of the way I feel about it this year, because if you were truly looking at trustworthy power ratings, Alabama's in the playoffs with their 3 losses. Who else would be in? South Carolina might be in. Ole Miss would for sure be in. And guess what? Arizona State, I think they're a 4 seed. They would not even be in. 3 seed Boise, they would not even be in right now. Boise and trustworthy power ratings are outside the top 30. So I think they got to make it clear and say we're going to go with a qualifying, which we did this year, or we're going to go with the top 12 teams in college football. And if they do that, they got to introduce like a sports book director who understands power ratings into the mix and let them know who's better than who. And then they can go from there. Your thoughts?
Yeah, I think you said it really well about, is this a qualifying tournament? Or, is this one of those things where that you just kind of make everybody happy? The participation trophy, where all the regions are happy, all the conferences are happy, all the athletic directors are happy. And, I'm a huge Crimson Tide fan. If I was in my studio office, you'll see all the Crimson Tide paraphernalia. And, but, I get it as an Alabama fan. I know a lot of Alabama fans. We're okay with not getting in.
Right.
I feel like if we're going to go in, we should go in to win. Yep. We don't want to go in to lose. We feel like we should not have gotten – the Vanderbilt loss turned out to be a decent loss, but the Oklahoma loss, getting blown out, was bad. And the other thing is, yes, Georgia was getting blown out, but Georgia had enough heart to make it close near the end, and Alabama didn't have enough heart to make it close to Oklahoma. They should have had some – I think if Alabama closed that gap against Oklahoma, the conversation might be a little bit different, but they didn't have enough heart to do that. And it's just not Alabama's time. It's not Alabama's time. So I think that, when you look at it I think the way they have it now is right. Maybe they'll add 2 more, right? Maybe they'll make it 14, and that way you get everyone to play, right? Or maybe they just go straight 8. Honestly, I think we have too many teams. I think the top 8 is good. I think Clemson is not one of the top 12.
Right.
You know what I mean? The Clemson has no business. And honestly, I don't like the conference championships either. There's no point to them.
Exactly.
There's no point to them. And, it's the same game. Is Georgia and Texas really going to play 3 times? No one wants to see this. And I think that's what I don't think they mind seeing it twice, but they don't want to see it 3 times. So I think you get rid of the conference games, and I think you make it top 8. I think they're sort of I definitely needed to be more than 2. Definitely probably needed to be more than 4, but I don't think people want to see more than 8. That's just my opinion, though. I
really think, and we'll move on here, but I really think that they should be seeded 1 through 12 with no bye weeks, and then move on with it. It's like you seed 1 through 12, 1 plays 12, 2 plays 11, and so on. And they might go to 14. I think that's got more of a chance than going all the way to 16. But I don't have a problem with, let's say, here's the parameters. If you qualify, you're in the mix. Doesn't matter if you're power rated 5th or 40th. If you did what you were supposed to, the rules that were laid out before the season, then you get in. And that's kind of what they did with this playoff. And I don't have a problem with that. I think it's okay. But I would like to see seeding 1 through 12 and then reseeding, kind of like the NBA does, and then I think it's a better product for everybody. All right, man, let's talk some NFL. We got week 15 coming up. We'll give some thoughts and opinions on some of these sides or totals. I want to kick off at the top of the schedule. I see with the Commanders at New Orleans in the Big Easy. Washington laying 7.5 here. The total is 43. Derek Carr is injured. He broke his hand for New Orleans. They are going to have to go with either Spencer Rattler or Jake Haener. And I did see where they went out on, I believe it was Wednesday morning, and they signed Ben DiNucci for depth. For Saints fans, for their own sake, I really hope DiNucci doesn't have to play this week. I'll just say that.
Yeah, man. It's the funny thing about the Saints is they've actually covered. They had covered after the coaching change a couple times. They beat Atlanta, and they beat my Falcons. They beat Cleveland, and they fell short to LA. But then they beat the Giants, right? They won 3 or 4 coming in. Washington, of course, comes off that huge win against Tennessee. I think New Orleans, actually gets up for this game a little bit. The one thing you got to be impressed with New Orleans is the last 4 games, their defense has been really good, giving up 17 to Atlanta and 14 to Cleveland and 21 to the Rams. And you saw how what the Rams did to the Bills defense, right? So that was pretty impressive. And then giving up 11 to the Giants. Washington, of course, comes up scoring 42 points. I think this game, I think in my opinion, you either have to take maybe New Orleans, but if you're a little afraid, I actually like the under in this game. I think as you're playing in New Orleans, as Washington comes off 42 points, I think they have a little bit of a letdown. And so I have an indirect play on New Orleans, which is the under. Okay. So I lean on the under.
Yeah, I can see it going that way. I'm not on the total here. I kind of, but here's what you're going to like. This will fit the under also. Last week I had the Giants in that game. And yes, I was on my hands and knees praying that he missed that short field goal because I didn't want overtime. Didn't want to sweat it. And of course, New Orleans blocked it. And I was like, all right, prayers answered, right? So anyway, going into that game, I was kind of writing about the contest and talking about it last week. And I was looking at what this year's team has done with and without Taysom Hill, talking about the New Orleans Saints. And he got injured a couple of games ago. Taysom Hill had been targeted 28 times in his previous 4 games for the Saints, 17 times in his prior 2. And this year, when he's been on the field, they're 4-3. When he's not been on the field, they're 0-6. And they average, less than 17 points per game when he's not on the field. So that kind of helps you out with that under potentially. So listen, I don't like New Orleans. I mean, they're 1-8 after scoring no more than 14 points. They're not a team that really fixes things quickly, as we know. And it's a lot of points, 7.5, but that's the way I'd go in this one, is with the Washington Commanders. Let's talk a little bit about the Dolphins and Houston. Texans laying 2.5, total 47.5. Your thoughts on this one?
Well, I thought the total was kind of high when I first saw it at 47. I was like, oh, that's interesting. And, I'd like Miami all year, and that's just because I think McDaniel is a funny, interesting character.
He is.
I watch McDaniel's pressers just for fun, just because he's the guy that wants people to like him when he was in high school. But, he's brilliant, but he's just a little weird. But Miami coming off the nice win against the Jets, New England, Vegas, LA, 405 wins. These are nice. I mean, and they've made a run at it here. And Houston's been fickle, dude. Houston's been a very fickle team. They lost to Tennessee. They lost to Detroit. They lost to the Jets. And then when you look at, even that game against Jacksonville, as far as, Stroud, I think Stroud is sort of a fickle player. I mean, when you have Mac Jones throwing for 235 yards on you, that's not very good, And then, I understand that Miami has San Francisco on deck, but I was impressed by their win against the Jets. I really was. That was a game where they had to really fight hard to come back because it was like 15-13 at the half. And then, the Jets basically went up by double digits. And I think Tua, threw for 330 last game. I think there's a lot of momentum here. I like the fact that Houston comes off a win. I think Miami will do well, actually. So I'm going to go with Miami.
The thing about C.J. Stroud is he's not getting the same kind of protection he got last year. And we're seeing a little bit of, maybe call it a sophomore slump. I think he's going to be fine eventually, and he plays for a great coaching staff. I am looking at the over here, and I'll tell you why. When it comes to Miami, with all the time that Tua missed, they still seem to be factoring in their offensive numbers as far as the behind the counter is concerned when it comes to those games he missed. And I get it. You kind of have to. They've gotten away from it a little bit this week, but I think there's still value there on that total, although it does look high, that it goes over. And again, I just think we're getting still some leftover value, if you will, with what this offense didn't do when Tua was sidelined. Let's talk a little bit about the New York Jets. Oh, this is a game you want to be at, right? The Jets and the Jags. I mean, Jets laying 3 here or thereabouts, total sitting at 40.5. Aaron Rodgers was given everything he wanted. He heard they were going to fire Hackett. They go out and they fire Saleh, which was the dumbest move the Jets have made in quite some time, firing the best coach in the room so Aaron Rodgers can still have his relationship on the field and off with Hackett. He goes out, he says, I want Devontae Adams. They bring the best receiver on the Raiders to the New York Jets, and they still are failing. Here they are, a 3-point road favorite, total 40.5. Your thoughts, I see.
Yeah, I like the over in this game, and I thought the Jets were, I think they're getting more comfortable as far as the offense. 27 against the Colts, 21 against Seahawks, which is pretty good, 26 against Miami. And of course, that was without overtime. And you have a Jacksonville team that, Mac, obviously, what do you say about Mac Jones? I mean, he played for Alabama. 220 yards and no touchdowns and 2 interceptions, and Jacksonville still ends up winning that game 10-6.
Great looking girlfriend, by the way. What is it, Bama? I don't know if they're still together, but
yeah, they are. they are, and that's something that everybody talks about. It's funny, but and same with the other McCarron's wife now, and but yeah, I think Jacksonville, to be honest with you, Matt can't play any worse, right? So I think they play much better here today and this weekend, and they still put up 20 points against Houston. And at the same time, I think the Jets will finally have sort of a bust-down game. And I wouldn't be surprised at all and I think that one thing the Jets have done well, I think, in the fact is they haven't really made any more changes.
Right.
They kind of calm down, figure this is going to be the future. Let's just get better and move to the future. Now, will Rodgers get hurt or not next year? I don't know. But I like the over in this game. I think Jacksonville can be an active dog. I think the Jets will can bust out and finally pick up a big win. So I like the over.
Cool. With you on that one, definitely. Bengals laying 5 at Tennessee. And I was going to talk about this one a little bit, IC, but I'm going to go ahead and let you do the honors because this is going to be one of the top premium plays for me this week, this game. I will say one thing about Monday night. I had a 6-star play at Docs on it. I think you did too. I thought I saw that. And I'm telling you right now, I begged for that Giants field goal to be missed. It was, and we've got no chance. Come on. Let's just admit it like it is. We're late in the fourth quarter, a couple of minutes to go, and we've got no chance. We might have got an overtime, and if we did, we win 26-20, hopefully, if the Bengals get a touchdown. But we didn't. We got even better. The screw up on special teams by the Dallas Cowboys. 2 plays later, we get a nice touchdown pass in which Jamar Chase ran for most of those yards on that touchdown pass. I'd like to say it was like we called it. I've done that before on X, on Twitter, where I've said, boy, that's about as easy as it gets, winner tonight. And everybody jumps on me and goes, what are you talking about? No sense of humor there, these people. But the bottom line is that, we were quite fortunate. I don't give back money even when I'm quite fortunate. This particular game right now, the Bengals about a 5-point road favorite. Your take on this one?
Yeah, I like the over in this game, and a couple of reasons. One, the Bengals obviously put up 27 against Dallas, 38 against Pittsburgh, and Dallas played their hearts out in that game. And, I'm still impressed with the Bengals offense. I mean, they just don't care. They know they're not going to the playoffs. They just do not care. Burrow takes more chances than he normally shouldn't. And, they put up 27 against a good Chargers defense, 34 against a good Baltimore defense, 41 against the Raiders, and so on. The under was my free play on Monday night because I figured that they're going to step up. But now I don't think they're going to step up. I don't trust this Bengals defense at all. They gave up 20 points last game. And at the same time, Tennessee cannot play any worse offense, scoring 6 points against Jacksonville. I think Levis had 2 interceptions, threw for less than 170 yards. And then you combine the fact that Tennessee defense gave up 10 points, and they're not going to do that again. They gave up 42 to Washington and 27 to a lowly Houston offense. So putting all of that together, I like the over.
I feel sorry for Burrow because this organization won't spend any money on defense. It's like we got Burrow, we got Jamar Chase. We don't even spend money on a great running back. They let one go last year when you talk about like Mixon. But that defense, boy, if they just spend some money. I actually like their coach. And, of course, you got to like Joe Burrow, but you got to do something with the defense. Coming up next, Ravens at the New York Giants. 16.5 biggest line in the NFL this year so far, I see. And the total sitting at 42.5. In fact, I did see where this is the biggest underdog that the New York Giants have been since December of 1966, when they were a 23-point underdog to the Dallas Cowboys. There was one other game where they were a 13.5-point dog 51 years ago against Kansas City. I mean, so we were kind of digging for this game a little bit when I was handicapping it. If you look at what these teams did early on, these big favorites, they were cashing. They were off to a 5-0 start this season, 0-4 in the last 4. So it's kind of equaled out a little bit. I do have some thoughts on this game. I'm going to let you go ahead and fire away first, and then I'll tell you what I like here.
Yeah, I mean, I like the Giants. I know the Ravens are off of a loss, and they certainly could bounce back. They lost to Cleveland 24-29, and they destroyed Denver 41-10. And I get that. And, they lost to Pittsburgh 16-18, and they covered against the Chargers 30-23. But I like Drew Lock in the sense that I think Drew Lock will, he didn't play that great last game. Mm-hmm. He threw for 178 yards against Dallas as well, and 1 interception. But you give a quarterback a couple of tries here, and he gets more used to this offense, I think he'll play better. And, they lost to a Saints team that actually played pretty well that game in defense. That Saints defense is pretty good, and they covered that game. And if you're the Giants and you're not going to the playoffs, is this not your Super Bowl? You get to face the Ravens. Do you not kind of get up? And Locke's had a couple of games. If this was Locke's first game, I would go against him. But I think given that I think people are just going to – I mean, what else are you going to put the line if you're an odds maker? You're going to have to put them at least a 14-point favorite, and they're coming off a loss, so why not 16.5? But I like the Giants. I think they surprise, and I think they hang tough.
Yeah, it won't be a premium play for me, but we're in agreement here on the New York Giants. And, you look at Lamar. Listen, everybody loves Lamar. This team's putting up offensive metrics that would be kind of coincide with a team that's, 11-2 rather than 8-5. They lost a couple of the tough games, but Lamar, I mean, he's 2-9 with a push against the spread the last 12 times that he's been a favorite of more than 6 points. For whatever reason, he makes some weird mistake in a game that they should clearly win, and it causes the game to be closer than it should be, and they don't cover these bigger numbers. So that's something you always got to look for. And I think, again, like you said, it's a big game for the Giants. They got nothing else to play for. So come up and play hard against Baltimore, and potentially you can at least keep this game close and hang that number. Chiefs are at Cleveland. Speaking of teams that don't cover point spreads, we talked about Lamar as an individual. Boy, the Chiefs just can't find a way to cover point spreads right now, yet they keep winning football games. They're laying 4 here at Cleveland. The total sitting at 44. There are some 4.5s out there, by the way. So, folks, you know what to do. If you like the Chiefs, you lay the 4. If you like Cleveland, you shop and you grab that 4.5. 7 straight spread losses for Kansas City, I see. Mahomes, how about 24 covers in his last 66 as a favorite of more than 3 points?
Yeah, man. It's just crazy. The Chiefs literally just cannot cover a game, and every game is tight. I mean, they beat the Raiders, of course, by 2 points. Beat the Panthers. The Panthers game was actually something that we could have called because the Carolina was getting better right at the right time, which I thought was interesting. But, Jameis has prayed to God that he will not throw any more pick sixes, and he's done his offerings to the Lord according to his presser. I mean, how can you not like Jameis Winston at the end of the game? I actually think the Browns covered in this game. These two teams haven't met since 2021. I like the fact that Cleveland comes off of back-to-back missed covers. I don't think Cleveland's missed 3 straight covers all year as well. And, Cleveland, Winston, of course, had 2 touchdowns and 2 interceptions last game. But, I mean, Jameis at home is a tough prospect.
Sure.
He beat the Steelers. He beat the Ravens. And, and he continues to play exceptionally well at home. And I don't think the Browns are going to lose 3 straight covers. And to be honest with you, I just don't trust the Chiefs at the end of the day. The Chiefs are doing just enough to win. But, Mahomes only threw for 210 yards last game. Look, it is a glaring sign when you still beat the Panthers by 3 and you still beat the Raiders by 2. And, you continue to struggle to pull away, which means there's something wrong with the game plan, which means you're doing just enough in the game plan, just enough big plays to pull it off, right? So maybe they're kind of – and Andy Reid's really good at that. Andy Reid saves a lot of stuff for the future. Yep. And which people don't know. See, like a coach's brilliance, you might only have 100 clever plays, right? So if you throw all your stars like Mario Kart, if you throw all your stars at once, then you don't have any good stars because the guy's seeing all the tape of all the other previous games that you've done, right? All the trick plays and stuff. So I think this is Andy Reid being Andy Reid, just doing enough. He's got it down to a science now, just doing enough, which is why they win these close games in the Super Bowl because he's doing stuff that other coaches haven't seen. So give me the Browns. Yeah, I'll definitely lean on the Browns. Yeah.
I lean that way. I couldn't do it because of Jameis, as much as I like the guy. He's a great guy. Everybody loves Jameis. But, boy, he makes some boneheaded plays a couple times a game that cost his team. And that's the reason I couldn't. Now, I'm not saying I love Kansas City here, but I do think it stays under that total of 44. The caveat there is, they could make a mistake, Jameis, and next thing you know, it's a pick six or short field situation, and that total's affected in that way. Real quick note on this as we move on to the next game with Kansas City. You talked about how close these games have been, and it's not been quite the same as we've seen in the past. Their yards per play margin is minus 0.2. That's equivalent to a 7-6 or a 6-7 team. That's not a 12-1 metric. Yet this team finds ways to win the game, even if they don't cover, which shows you what Andy Reid and Patrick Mahomes can do together on the field. But yeah, I mean, it's minus 0.2 is not championship football by any stretch of the imagination. Cowboys at Carolina. Carolina laying 2.5. Saw some threes also on this game. The total sitting at 43. Boy, I don't know how Dallas gets back on track between the years, I see, after the way they lost that game the other night. You saw Micah Parsons walking off the field before the game was even over. I mean, he was beside himself. And, Carolina's played a better brand of football. They're kind of the opposite of Kansas City right now, where, they normally lose football games, but they also know how to cover spreads. They've covered 5 in a row.
Yeah, and that's I think one of the best things that happened for Bryce, being a Bama fan, is getting benched for a while, taking the pressure off him. And I think people are like, why are they starting Andy Dalton right now? All the talking bobbleheads and all these channels. But they were talking because they were trying to take pressure off Bryce. They were just trying to let him sort of veg out and just chill out for a few games and just kind of, just relax. Sometimes your brain needs a break, right? And I think that was the best thing that could happen for him. Next thing you know, things are starting to slow down for him a little bit. And I think Dallas, who are you more excited about? Which team are you more excited about if you're a fan? You're far more excited about being a Panthers fan than you are about a Cowboys fan. You're growing, and this team is growing. They're covered 5 in a row. They lost by 3 to Kansas City. They beat New Orleans. They got their first couple wins, right? They're 3-10, but they're 2-3, right? And so they won 2 out of their last 5. And, against the Eagles, they were right there and, up 16-14 before the Eagles had to come back. Yeah, I think it's just an excitement thing. And if you're Carolina, do you not get up for Dallas? What a great win for them. And if you're Dallas, you're just hoping the season ends. Give me Carolina.
Yeah, I like them here by about 4 to 7 points. So I tell people that have already asked me about this game, just shop around, because there are plenty of 2.5s out there if you like the Panthers. And if you like the Cowboys, there's enough 3s out there to grab the full field goal. But I'm with you on this one. I do like Carolina laying a couple of points in this one. Steelers at Philly. I can't wait to watch this game. Philly laying 542.5. Listen, I've had a real nice run for a long time when it comes to futures, when it comes to wins totals. I was just flat out wrong on this one. I had the Steelers under their wins total, and they blew it out of the water. And they've done a couple of games where they've gone in and not scored a touchdown and won the game because they got 6 field goals twice. So, here they are now going against Philly. Philly's won a bunch of games in a row. They're looking like a team that can contend, which they weren't looking that way 8-9 games ago. I'm just stuck on this one. I got to tell you, I see, if you look at Mike Tomlin, he's been fantastic, obviously, as an underdog. 5-0 Suats this season when getting points. He's covered 65% of his last 103 games as a dog. And if you think this game is a close game, how about a 37-14 straight up run when this team loses by 1 score? Talking about Pittsburgh. So this is when they're favored by, in a short game, but it's a 1-score decision. They're 37-14 the last 51. I was a Russell Wilson fan, I see, back when he was even at, Wisconsin, and even before that at NC State. And when he came out of school, it was funny. I used to do a radio show here in Las Vegas for several years, and I was hosting the show. My co-host is on with me, and he told me I had a man crush on Russell Wilson because all I did was talk about how great this kid was going to be. Well, he was under Pete Carroll until the end, and then he goes to Denver, and he just didn't jive. Well, Hackett was terrible as a head coach. Then he didn't jive at all with Sean Payton. Under Mike Tomlin, this guy's looking like he's just turned back the clock 7 or 8 years. It's tough to lay 5 against Pittsburgh.
Yeah, I never handle Mike Tomlin Pittsburgh games well. And that's sort of my Achilles heel, Mike Tomlin Pittsburgh. Having said that, I will go against Mike Tomlin Pittsburgh because I think that I don't think Pittsburgh. I hold that loss against Cleveland on the road against them, and I like the fact that Philadelphia played like dog poop against Carolina. And I think that's a good situation for them. I think that's a big wake up call for them. And I think that you have Jalen Hurts. Do you know how many yards Jalen passed for last game? 108. So I think the pressure's on him to play a little bit better. I can see Russell. Obviously they come off a nice win against the Browns, but they had revenge that game. Russell didn't crush it. He threw for 160 and had 2 touchdowns and no interceptions. So I like the Eagles here. I think a lot of people is going to jump on Pittsburgh, and I know the books are going to be rooting for the Eagles as well. I understand why the Eagles are favored. I understand why people would like Pittsburgh, but I just think I don't fully trust the Steelers, and I think the Eagles are looking ahead to this game. So I think the Eagles win by 7.
All right, can deal with that. Bills at Detroit. Detroit laying 2.5 here. Total set at 54.5. One of the most exciting games this year, maybe the most exciting game of the year, was last week in that Rams battle against the Buffalo Bills. And listen, man, you got a quarterback. I mean, this guy is amazing. He's one of the best I've seen ever. What he did again last week, 400 plus yards on his own between his arm and his legs. The amount of touchdowns they put up, like 6 touchdowns in that game by the offense. In fact, found this somewhere where when you look at teams that have scored at least 4 touchdowns, commit 0 turnovers, and lose, I mean, that just doesn't happen in the NFL. It's extremely rare, and it's only happened a couple of times. And I think as far as, what this team could do now is they're going to have to actually, get back on track between the years, start playing a little bit a better brand of defense. But the reason I can't back Buffalo in this game, I see, is because that offensive line for the Lions. I mean, this offensive line is punishing. They got 2 running backs who could run behind this offensive line and do damage. So for me, it's like if Detroit's got their head together and they haven't had a single game this season where they've not been emotionally invested and ready to go in a game, I think they end up winning this game by a touchdown. That offensive line, I just think, wins this battle. And if you look at what they've done under Campbell, 22-10 against the number at home, they're off a loss. They have rest advantage. I think Detroit gets the game here and covers the spread along with it.
Yeah, I like the. I'm going to stay away from the side. And it's interesting because Buffalo did lose once this year, back-to-back games against Baltimore and Houston before they went on a run. But I like the under here. I think that Buffalo is going to have to bounce back defensively. That's what's glaring, right? 44 points against the Rams, or giving up 44 points. And that's the most amount of points they've given up all year. And I think they bounce back on the defensive side of things. I also like the fact that Detroit gave up 31 points to the Packers, right? And I think they're going to be focused on that. I think that is their season high, too, the most amount of points that they've given up. And, keep in mind that Green Bay put up 24 points on them in the second half. And I think that's going to sort of irritate them a little bit too. I love when really good teams face each other because I like to take a look at the under, right? Sure. They're really good because of their offense, but also really good because of their defense. And I think people forget when sexy teams come around, I think people forget how good defenses can be. And I like the under between these two.
It's been the way to go when the total's in the mid-50s this year in the NFL. The under's been cashing more than the over, that's for sure. Colts at Denver this week. Denver laying 4, total 44. I saw a write-up today on Wednesday afternoon, and it was talking about Anthony Richardson, and the actual words were along the lines of, boy, he's been terrific. He's been great in his 3 games since coming back from the team suspension. I can't agree with that. He was 20 of 30 against the Jets the first game he came back after not playing for a couple of games. 20 for 30, 270 plus yards, touchdown, no picks. Last 2 games against Detroit and New England, he's 23 for 52. That's 44%. 2 touchdowns, 2 picks. I'm not sure that constitutes, boy, he's got it together and he's playing great now, unless he was horrible before that. He wasn't horrible. He's one of these guys that was kind of a wasted draft pick as far as I'm concerned because he didn't have enough experience playing football. Came along late, and now they're kind of paying for it. Only one team in the NFL is better than Denver in yards per play allowed and in red zone defense, and their defensive metrics are terrific all around. Indy's defensive numbers are as bad as Denver's are good. And Sean Payton off a bye week wasn't happy with his team giving up 32 points before the bye week. I like Denver here laying 4. I almost feel like I'm being really square here with this particular pick because I just can't get on the Anthony Richardson bandwagon.
Yeah, I was shocked at the line. I thought it was going to be like 6.5. I thought that would have been maybe what the line could have been. Indianapolis beat obviously the Patriots by 1 point, and Richardson had 109 yards and 2 touchdowns, and 2 interceptions. He got outdueled if you can by Derek May. I will tell you this: the fact that Indianapolis is so hit or miss, they did go on the road to beat the Jets, of course. And I'm surprised the total is also at 44 too, a little bit. I wouldn't have been surprised if this total was a little bit lower too. But I don't know how Denver doesn't do, and Indianapolis hasn't won back-to-back games since the middle of October, right? But this team did lose to Minnesota by 8. They lost to Houston by 3. They lost to Buffalo by 10. And the loss in Detroit wasn't as bad as I thought. It was 6-24. But the only thing I can think of is maybe the over, right? I actually think Indianapolis will have some success here because I think it's a good public fade. I mean, why else is the line 4? So if you think Indianapolis can show up, and if Richardson, can have some success here, Denver also, for the fact that they've given up 32 points against Cleveland is fine. They still gave up 19 to Vegas, and I don't count the Atlanta game because my Falcons are horrible. So I think a small lean on the over for me, but I don't have a great feel for this game at all because I can't take I can't take the Colts, but I also feel like I'm being squared too with Denver. Having said all that, I'm sure they're going to win by 17, and we're going to be like, whatever. So
should have had him, yeah. But yeah, I do believe that this is going to be a one-sided betting situation from the public. Maybe not from sharper money, but from the public. So that does make it tough to lay the 4 here. It just feels like it's going to be a square play. And I was checking out, kind of the respected money versus the public money earlier on Wednesday. And I did see a little bit more of a percentage from the public on Denver than sharp money. So we'll see how it plays out. Buccaneers at the Chargers. Chargers laying 3 here. Total 44.5 to 45.5. I've seen different numbers over the last 24 hours. And, I could see why it might be inching up a little bit with the Chargers total because they did upgrade Lad McConkey to questionable. And, it's such a big deal for Justin Herbert. And then, of course, Tampa Bay's injury list. My gosh, have you seen it? I thought War and Peace was tough. I mean, this reads like a Leo Tolstoy novel, that injury list for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. For me this week, and as much as I respect what they've done on offense with Tampa Bay, you got a nice young quarterback who has really turned and saved his career after leaving Cleveland. I still think the Chargers get their number here. I'm going to put my trust in Jim Harbaugh that they bounce back from a heartbreaking loss and get the victory here and cover the spread along the way.
Yeah, I think Harbaugh on a bounce back is pretty good, right? And Harbaugh's consistently bounced back and covered the spread every single time. And these two teams haven't met, obviously in a couple of years as well. But Tampa Bay, the fact that they beat 3 teams, they beat the Giants, they beat the Panthers, and they beat the Raiders. I was impressed with that Panthers win, especially by 3 points. And I know they were favored by 6.5, but I was still pretty impressed. Whenever I've gone against Baker, I've always fallen short. I've always felt like Baker has a tendency to come through, especially the Lions game, right? This team also needs this game. They're 7-6, so they desperately need this game too. I thought the total was interesting. Normally, Bucks games can range even as high as high 40s or whatnot. And I think the Chargers, when they sort of bounce back after a loss, they have a tendency to go under, right? After the Ravens lost, they went to 30 points, and after Arizona game, they went to 34 points against New Orleans. So the only thing that kind of makes sense to me is possibly the under. I do think they'll have some success here. I think that the Chargers, whenever they come off a loss, they try not to make Herbert do too much. Sure. Harbaugh hasn't released the hounds on Herbert yet all year. He's tried to always just tell him, just give me 200 yards and I'll take care of the rest, And so I do like the under in this game, and I also like the Chargers as well. I probably like the under a little bit more.
I think he's thrown 1 pick all year. It's been many, many weeks since we've seen Herbert throw a pick. He's got the right coach. It's, let's get the running game going. Let's throw some safe routes and go from there. We haven't had to see him really, throw the ball 45 times yet this season. Just finally got a good coach, and he's playing well. Patriots in Arizona, Zona laying 6 here, total sitting at 46. All of a sudden, Arizona loses 3 in a row, and they drop from first place in the division down to third now behind both Seattle and the Rams. Big game for them. And I put those losses I see on Kyler Murray. And I'm a Kyler Murray fan for the most part, but he's small. He's one of those guys that, boy, if he was like 2 to 3 inches taller, I think he'd be even more of a consistently good quarterback in the NFL. But 5 picks, 3 touchdown passes during this 3-game skid. They outgained the Vikings by $130, 130 yards, but his 2 interceptions hurt them significantly, and they ended that loss by 1 point. Do you think they bounce back here against Seattle? I mean, it's a big game for both teams, obviously.
Yeah, I mean, Arizona played actually quite well against Minnesota. I was on Arizona for that game, so I'm glad it hit. But losing back-to-back games to Seattle, that is a crushing defeat. You know what I mean? You lost to a division opponent in back-to-back games. That just crushes you in so many different ways. 30 points is the most number of points that Arizona and their defensive coordinator, have given up since the last 7 weeks. But that's a lot of points for them. And you combine the fact that New England, Jared Mayo, the last 3 games, their defense has been a little leaky. 28 to the Rams, 34 to Miami, 25 to Indianapolis. I think what happens here is Arizona is going to take. I like the over. I think Arizona takes out some frustration here, and I also think that New England has success because they continue to have success on offense, right? So
Yep.
I do think they're an active dog, and I like the over here between these two teams. I think Arizona's finally going to sort of bust out, and I think the Patriots, because of their injuries, is the reason why they're leaky on defense lately. You can kind of see it, and that's why that total's creeped up a little bit at 46, and not a normal 43 total for Patriot games. So I like the over.
I lost it there for just a second. Sorry. I
Yep.
see everybody watching, but we're back. And listen, as far as I'm concerned, that's the way I would go in this game. And I said big game for both teams. Let me clarify that. I mean, this is a big game for Arizona to win for both them and Seattle. And you can throw the Rams in that mix also. Not a big game necessarily for the struggling New England Patriots. I was looking at some of the Patriots results, and the key really here is to get out in front of New England. They are 4-25 against the spread the last 29 times that they've trailed by more than 6 points at any point of the game. I mean, if you're live betting, this isn't a team that you go, okay, I'm down 8. I'm going to jump on New England here because I saw a couple of metrics that may change and go their way. Well, they're 4-25 in those games. So just get out early. Don't make dumb mistakes if you're Kyler Murray. Make sure to take care of the pigskin, and I think they win this game. And not only that, but as you mentioned, go over that total of 46. They got a chance to bust out here a little bit against the Patriots. Sunday Night Football, Packers laying 2.5, total 46.5 at Seattle in this one. Green Bay was badly outgained by Detroit last week, but were able to keep it tight till that last-second field goal for Detroit's win. It was a rare December loss for Matt LaFleur. I mean, he's 18-3 now straight up in December football games. They always tend to seem to play a little bit better when we get to this point of the season. You know, there's a lot of these 2.5 type numbers this week. They're really making the bettors commit. And, you know, I used to do a show with Jimmy Vaccaro, who's over the South Point now, the legendary bookmaker. And I used to say, man, aren't you worried about getting burned on one side? Not that this would be a one-sided betting game, but I'd say you put out a 2.5. Aren't you worried about getting burned on the chalk? And people tend to like to bet the chalk, especially primetime games. He goes, I don't care. He goes, I'll just make the adjustment on my number and I'll get them to bet the other way. So it's simple as that behind the counter. Not so simple for those of us who are trying to beat the guys behind the counter. Your take on this one?
Yeah, I like the Pack. And you know, Green Bay off of a loss has been pretty good this year, right?
Sure.
Losing to Minnesota, coming back and beating the Rams, or losing to Detroit and coming back and beating the Bears, barely, but beating the Bears. And I like them giving up 34 points to the Lions. I think it's going to piss them off. And I thought they played pretty well. I mean, but Jordan Love, you know, threw for 206 yards and 1 touchdown. And this was a team that was down, you know, 17-7, right, at the half. And I think they started a little bit faster here. And I don't trust and I'll tell you something off the air, which is interesting about Seattle. I'll tell you something very interesting about off the air, about Seattle. But I don't trust Seattle coming off 3 straight wins either, right? You have them beating, or 4 straight wins, beating San Francisco, but San Francisco is hobbled coming into that game, beating Arizona, but Arizona's looked shaky twice. And I think they are going to put a sort of a sigh of relief after beating Arizona back-to-back games. And I think Green Bay is going to come in pissed. And I like Green Bay.
Yeah, I'm with you. And the other win was against the Jets, if I recall correctly. So it was like 4 games, the right spot, just what the doctor ordered for Seattle in a couple of those games with their opponents and how they went into those games. You mentioned San Francisco being beat up at the time. And another thing to throw into the mix, Geno Smith, 8 touchdowns, 10 interceptions in front of the home folks. He plays better on the road than he does at home. Used to be an ongoing joke is that we would talk about Geno when he was at West Virginia that last season when he was leading the Heisman race. And basically what happened is Texas Tech figured out a lot of movement before the snap threw him off. And then Bill Snyder for K-State copied what happened with Texas Tech. And he just had a terrible second half of the season. So he used to say Geno can't read. Well, he's fixed that. And he's a good guy. And I'm glad for him. But he still struggles at home. And I'm with you. I think Green Bay catches him here. 2 Monday Night Football games this week. We got a black and blue division matchup. First up, Minnesota laying 7, the total 43.5, hosting the badly struggling Chicago Bears, who didn't even get a boost or a bump from a coaching change last week.
Yeah, dude, I thought they were going to get a bump. And that did happen. And, you know, historically, you know, you have the Vikings who won the last time out, and Chicago, you know, gave up 38 points to San Francisco. That's just ugly. But San Francisco also was coming off a bad situation too, so that's why that happened. You have a coach here that it's sort of like the Jet situation where you have a new coach. He'll get more used to the current situation. And Minnesota comes off throttling my Falcons and beating them, scoring, winning 6 in a row. And Kirk Cousins, they feel pretty good about letting Kirk go now. And the fact that Minnesota gave up 42 or scored 42 points is incredible. But I think, notice the total at 43.5. And I think Minnesota has a big letdown offensively. I think Chicago has a big correction defensively. And 71% is riding the over. Give me the under here.
To go along with that, by the way, and I was going to say, I'm not a big angles guy, but I do like to look at them because sometimes they simply make sense. And for me, it's not something I base a play on, but if I handicap a game and I like a game or a side or a total, and I find something that makes sense, and it's a league-wide angle, not a, Minnesota does this, that, or the other over the last 20 years because most of those players weren't around for 20 years and neither was the coaching staff. But I like human nature league-wide angles, I like to call them. And in this situation, the under is actually 22-4 in the NFL and averaged 37 points per game when one team is off a double-digit loss and the other team scored no more than 17 points in each of the last 2 games. And the final part of that mix is that if the total is between 42.5 and 49, stays under 22-4. So not that I base it off of angles, but I sure like it when it goes along with my handicap of the game. And it's a league-wide angle, like I mentioned, I like. So there we are, both on the under, the Bears and Vikings. And then finally, the Falcons out here in Las Vegas, Atlanta laying 4. Your Atlanta Falcons. I wish we could have a dinner bet or something and say this is my Las Vegas Raiders because I have been out in Las Vegas, my entire adult life. I hate the Raiders. Okay, I like them when I bet on them. I have never been a Raiders fan. Half the crowd is usually the visiting team here in Las Vegas at Allegiant Stadium. They're a mess. Mark Davis is smart right now. He's selling off chunks of the team. Has to do with, death tax and all that coming down the road one day. It's crazy. If you look it up, you'll see all the reasons for taxes that he's doing this right now. What do you think about your team, man? Kirk Cousins has been struggling badly. And then, of course, you've got a situation where the Raiders are in a spot where, they don't have a quarterback. I mean, what are they going to do? You got Desmond Ridder. You're familiar with him. He was in Atlanta for a while.
Yeah, man, it's wild. I would tell you this, that Sam Darnold threw for 5 touchdowns last game against my Falcons, and which is fascinating. The Falcons are tied 21-21 going into the fourth quarter, and then they gave up 21 points in the fourth quarter, which is why they lost, right? Yeah. Atlanta's lost 4 in a row, and you have a coach here who has Raheem Morris, who has said that Kirk's our guy, right? He's not going to throw in the towel on Kirk, and Kirk is still our guy. But if Kirk loses this game, I don't know if he's going to be our guy, anymore. And Penix is right there, and this is the reason why they had Penix. They wanted a situation where I'm not saying it's a Dalton Bryce Young situation because Kirk is still pretty young, but this was the reason why Penix would add more to the offense for sure, right? You're going to have to sort of play back on your heels. Kirk's not going to run. Right. And so that makes a big difference here. But Las Vegas is, they gave up 28 points to Tampa Bay. Of course, Coach Pierce and stuff, and they've lost 9 in a row coming in. I would think that Atlanta, obviously, this is a must win for Atlanta, like really must win for Atlanta because your quarterback might change. And you paid him a ton of money, so your entire quarterback might change, et cetera. But something smells fishy, too, about this game. You know what I mean? I can see Ridder playing. I can see Ridder balling out. And, I think there's 2 games that sort of smell fishy for us. The Broncos game and then this game smells a little fishy here. But, and even the total, right? Even the total sitting in around 44.5. I think the only thing because I want to take the over, but I also know Atlanta gave up 42 points last game and Vegas gave up 28 as well. And so I have a very difficult time in this game. If anything on Monday night, I like the under in the Bears-Vikings game. In this game, if anything, maybe a small lean on Atlanta just because of the desperation, but that's it.
Yeah, I mean, maybe Ridder has some extra motivation by facing his former team, but I'm just like, God, he's bad. He's just not an NFL quarterback, and now he's got to get out there and make it happen. That angle that I mentioned fits this game as far as unders are concerned between the Falcons and Raiders, but you're right. I mean, because of the Bears, because of Las Vegas, I mean, this is a crappy card. And the networks ought to thank thoroughly bettors for tuning into this game because this is not a game that non-bettors watch, these 2 games on Monday night. Viking fans, yes. Maybe Bear fans, Falcons fans, yes. Maybe some Raider fans. And that's it. it's not a game that gets, Joe Blow in Des Moines, Iowa, all excited to watch on Monday night, other than from a point spread angle. Listen, before we wrap it up, just want to get your thoughts on maybe you've kind of diagrammed or formed your opinions for this week for football, because the folks can find our plays for the upcoming football weekend, Thursday through next Wednesday, on our homepages over at DocSports.com on Thursday afternoon. Have you decided at this point how many games you're going to have, what you're looking at?
Yeah, I try to have an IC 5, right?
Mm-hmm.
I try to have 5 football plays every week. It's typically what I do in my free play videos too. Try to give about 5 free plays. So yeah, I think I'll have a combination of probably 3 or 4 NFL, maybe 1 or 2 college. I think I'm going to have less college just because there's so much. I know no NFL players are going to go on a nil deal, or go or enter in the transfer portal to the CFL or something. So probably more NFL based. Maybe I'll have 1 college as well, but a game that matters, right? And that's the thing. That's the other thing, Scott. I think going forward, people are going to be wagering on games that matter in college football, like the playoff games, because they're all going to play. These other games, outside of the really smart schools that are playing, because those guys know they don't have a future in the NFL, like the Georgia Tech, Vanderbilt game, all those guys are going to play.
Right.
So the only games that are worth, I think, having predictions on are really smart schools that are in a bowl game or your playoffs.
Yeah.
The other middle of the road, Cal, UNLVs, these bridge guys, the people that are hoping to bridge from California to get into an SEC school, or UNLV to get into a primetime Big Ten, that kind of stuff. I think those stuff you sort of stay away from. But that's kind of why I just made myself only do 5 plays. So that way I can start throwing away stuff.
Yeah, I'm going to have 1 college football play. I mean, we do have 2 going Saturday, but I'm in the same boat as you are. I mean, my bowl, cards 10 years ago used to feature 12, 13, 14 plays throughout the course of the bowls. And this year, last year, I've narrowed that down. It might be a game or 2 more by the time it's all said and done this year than I had last year, because we have a 12-team playoff. And of course, last year and every other year, it's been 4 teams battling it out. So we might get a couple more plays there. And we know there's not going to be guys holding out for no money when it comes to those playoff games. But I would say probably about 4 or 5 plays this week. It's going to be all NFL except for 1 play. And we've had a real nice run, sitting at 47-30, 61% college and pro combined since mid-September. And going all the way back, I went over the final week of August in college football IC. And since September 1st, my college record is 26-12 now. 29-15 after last week. So that's where we're sitting right now in college football. We'll look to bang out some winners again this weekend. You can find all of IC and my plays on our personal homepages over at DocSports.com. And again, don't forget about that $60 free account if you're not yet a member at Doc Sports. Great way to give Docs a trial run. Click on the link below the video. Get yourself set up for the free 60. We are going to be here each and every Wednesday. I don't know if we're going to go 50 minutes long every week. That got kind of long as we both were talking a little bit, but we will be here with as much information as possible. And folks, if you like these videos, if they help you out, man, be sure to subscribe. Be sure to click on that like button, comment, whatever.
And Scott, let's throw this out there. If you have we don't have a name for the show, so we can crowdsource this too. Scott is a handsome, older-looking white guy, and I've got a lot of gray too. So I guess I'm starting to become an older-looking Indian guy too. So, and we'll throw you. If we like one of your names, we'll throw you something. We'll have Doc send you something out, or we'll send you some. We'll definitely send you a gift, right? Some steaks or something. But this is Scott and I. If you have a name for the show, we'd love for you to pick it for us.
That's a great idea. So for IC, for me, for DocSports.com, you name the show. We'll tell you what it is next week, and we'll talk to you again next week. And everybody have a great week. Best of luck. And as I like to say, let's put them in the win column.